Trese episode 3. So this episode is a lot better than the previous episode. I feel like structure-wise, it was better in the sense that it didn't feel like a bunch of different stories clobbered together. Though there is a little bit of that, it's not as bad as the previous episode. So we do have the continuation of Ramona's story. For anyone who doesn't know, Ramona's story started in the last episode, and it was basically a flashback. And Ramona's trying to get revenge on General Hidalgo for basically getting her to kill all of her people. At least that's what she says. And that's where this picks up. So it starts with Ramona just finishing setting up a giant symbol made in blood. She's just finished lighting a bunch of candles. There are soldiers around the symbol as well as dead bodies. Meanwhile, we hear two kids talking, and they are Ramona's kids, and they are currently holding up the captured Hidalgo. So we have like a back and forth between Hidalgo and Ramona, and basically Hidalgo's like, you made me kill my men. Ramona's like, you made me do the same. And she basically starts off this ritual. Meanwhile, we have Antoine talking to his men, and his men are camped outside of the house that Hidalgo was in, and he tells them, surround the place. We're going to have to try to free him. And so they go and do that. Meanwhile, Ramona basically is finishing up her ritual. She has hearts that she has cut out of the soldiers, and that we saw a bit of in the previous episode. She's squeezing the blood out of them onto this medallion. The medallion is sucking it up, and then she puts the medallion on Hidalgo and tells her two boys to leave, like go outside, go play outside. So they snap Hidalgo's arms in a brutal fashion, and Ramona basically uses a knife to slice open Hidalgo's shirt, and the soldiers that are there, they surround Hidalgo in a circle. They each slice their necks open, and the blood drips onto the medallion. Meanwhile, after they slit their necks open, they obviously die. And the blood that squirted out of their necks gets absorbed into the medallion, and then the medallion gets inside of Hidalgo. It just kind of like sinks into his chest. As this is going on, the boys are having a fight with Anton's men outside. And it's a pretty decent fight. We find out that some of the men are obviously werewolves, so we got a fight between these ghost boys and werewolves. It does not end well for Anton's men. And then we get this really cool body horror scene where basically we see Hidalgo, like he stands up and an arm rips out of his arm and a leg rips out of his leg, and he basically grabs his mouth, his upper jaw and his lower jaw, and he pulls it back and rips it open, and then we see Ramona's lover, which is this weird deity. That's when Ramona and his kids show up, and Ramona's lover's happy. He's just like, twins, even better. Now there's more for me to devour. And then he pulls out his sword, and then that's when the flashback ends. So it's pretty much hinting that he's going to kill his kids and Ramona. And I'm just like, all right, you know, I guess you deserve it. This is what you get for sleeping around with evil deities. But I thought I could change him. No, you couldn't. And so that ends that whole flashback. So I don't know if that's the end of Ramona's story or if we're going to see her in episode 4. I will say, like, I feel like Ramona's whole situation could just be an episode on its own. I don't like the fact that we're basically 6 minutes into the episode before we actually start our actual episode. So the first 6 minutes are just dedicated to the intro and to the intro music and to Ramona's flashback. And I really don't care about that. Like, I feel like rather than sprinkling Ramona's story throughout the whole entire series, if we get her in episode 4, because I've only watched the first 3. Basically, I watch an episode and then I do a review. So I'm doing all these reviews blind. I don't know what's going to happen in future episodes. But assuming we see Ramona in the next episode, I feel like, you know what? You have enough minutes there to just, cut all those out and just dedicate an entire episode to Ramona's story. You don't need to sprinkle it in throughout the entire series. I feel like you just kind of waste time, especially in the second episode. The second episode, it seemed like you kind of had to rush the other 2 stories because we had to dedicate a lot of time to Ramona's story. And so everything else, like Alexandra's cases, just seemed really rushed because of that. But that's just my opinion. I don't know if you guys feel the same way or not. Anyway, so back to the present time. We have Dr. Petra. She's on the phone and she's going to her car when she starts hearing these weird noises and what sounds like a baby crying. And she pulls out a gun when all of a sudden something from underneath the car grabs her legs, pulls her under, and basically just we see a bunch of blood just splatter. And I was like, all right, that's a kind of bad way to go. That's one of my when it comes to like one of the worst ways to die, one of them is being eaten alive, I think. Especially if it's slowly being alive. Of course, also being buried alive or being burned alive. But yeah, being eaten alive has just got to be a terrible way to go. So yeah, then we cut to Alexandra in a car riding with Hank and her two bodyguards, Crispin and Basilo. And we just kind of have a little back and forth where they're kind of poking fun at Hank for listening to disco music and they want to change the station, but he won't let them. And yeah, it's kind of nice, I guess, see some more character and personalities from these people, except for Alexandra. Like Crispin and Basilo and Hank have way more personality than Alexandra does. Alexandra is still just way too stoic. But anyways, they have received a call from Captain Guerrero, and they basically show up to Dr. Petra's crime scene. And we have this really funny moment where Alexandra shows up and she sees a dead body of Dr. Petra, which, as you can see, is just completely mutilated and messed up and just blood and chunks everywhere. And Alexandra's very first response to seeing all this is, so why did you call me? And I'm just thinking, well, I don't know, Alexandra. Maybe look at the body and kind of figure that out for yourself. Why do you think Captain Guerrero calls you? I mean, he only calls you when it seems to be a supernatural case. Looking at this body, I'm pretty sure this is a supernatural case. Are you telling me that you can't see that? Why do you think he called you, Alexandra? Let's just take a wild shot in the dark here. I don't know, I just thought, like, throughout this entire series, they portrayed Alexandra as, like, you know, really smart and calculative and stuff like that. And it just seemed like a really weird line to have her say. Why did you call me? I don't know. Why do you think I called you? Why don't you look at the body and you tell me? It's just, I don't know. I was kind of laughing at that moment. Anyway, she says some magical phrases, and then we see like footprints kind of flash on the floor. And you notice the footprints lead to a vent, but the vent is not damaged or touched in any way. So they're kind of wondering, like, there's no way a human can squeeze through that. And Alexandra says, well, maybe it wasn't human. Yeah, I would assume so. Like, what gave that away? Was it the mutilated, deformed body and the weird magical footprints? So, anyways, Alexandra asks, like, you know, can we see the CCTV footage? Does it show anything on there? Captain Guerrero says that the mall refuses to show them what's on the CCTV because they don't want it getting out to the press and to the news that someone, you know, died in their parking lot. So Alexandra's like, all right, no worry, we got this covered. So she shows up to the security room and she chants something, and this ghost dude shows up, and this is Joe Burtz, which I kind of chuckled at that name. And Joe Burtz is, yeah, I guess he's a ghost or whatever. So Alexandra basically says, hey, like, I need you to figure out what's going on, like what happened in the parking lot. So he kind of hacks away at the computer, during which he informs her that the last person that Dr. Petra was calling before she was murdered was Maria, aka Nova Aurora. And Nova is a very popular actress. Apparently Hank is her biggest fan. And so Alexandra's thinking, all right, well, we got nothing else to go on other than the fact that Petra was brutally murdered, and the last person she talked to was Maria, and that Maria and her were longtime friends, and Dr. Petra was like the president of Maria's fan club. So let's go check out, Maria and see what's going on. Maybe she might know something. So they show up to the studio where Miss Nova is working, and this guy escorts them back into Nova's room where they're basically waiting for her to come back after her latest shooting, during which Alexandra walks up to one of the plants and she says a phrase, and basically this mud golem shows up, and inside the mud golem's hand is this creature named Almong, and Almong is basically the chief of the Red Earth tribe, and they're a duende creature. And during this conversation with Alexandra, we basically find out that Miss Nova is a familiar of Almong. Almong is basically taking Nova under his wing and trains her and kind of guards her. And there's some kind of, I don't know what he gets out of it really. When Alexandra asks, he just says that he gets involved in all things beautiful, which Miss Nova is. So, yeah, I don't really know how exactly that relationship works. Like what the whole familiar thing is with the duende, but there you go, that's how it is. And of course, Miss Nova runs in and she's scared and worried, and she basically tells Almong that, like, it was there again. Like, I saw the red eyes and the voices, but no one else could see or hear them. I'm scared, like, what do I do? And that's when Alexandra basically says, all right, like, all of us will go out and we'll investigate. We're going to search the area, see if we can find anything. Hank, meanwhile, you stay and you guard Miss Nova. Make sure nothing happens to her. And I don't know if you guys are hearing that. I don't know if the mic's picking it up, but my dog is snoring in the background. So if you guys, if I'm going back and I edit this and I don't hear it, then you guys won't hear this, little explanation from me. But if you do, I apologize. I could wake her up and kick her out of the room, but I feel bad for that. And, I mean, I just want to let her sleep. But yeah, hopefully she won't be too loud. So as Alexandra's searching, she's kind of asking, like, do you know any enemies that Miss Nova would have? Like, anyone that would go after her? And Almong basically explains, well, once Miss Nova got this part, all the other actresses that were in contention to try to get this part hated Miss Nova. So maybe it was one of them. Maybe one of them put a curse on Miss Nova. So Alexandra's like, all right, well, you go search the perimeter of the buildings. Meanwhile, we will search around inside and see if we can find anything. And then we cut back to Hank and Miss Nova, where Miss Nova basically shares her story, where her grandma used to call her, like, the shining star, which is where she got the name Nova Aurora, and that her mom died when she was a baby and her grandma raised her, and how her grandma used to, like, stencil her name into, like, all the clothing that she made for her, just like a little thing like that. And she basically tells Hank how scared she is. So Hank decides to completely disobey Alexandra's orders of staying with Miss Nova and making sure nothing happens to her, and he decides to go outside. And yeah, he leaves so that he can stock up on weapons and stuff. I was like, all right, I mean, that's kind of cool that, like, you have all these weapons and junk inside your trunk, and I did not mean for that to rhyme. It's giving me very supernatural vibes. But, I mean, you had one task, dude. You just had one task, and you completely ignored that. Meanwhile, outside, Alexandra's searching the premises, not really finding anything. They're trying to get some information from Joe Birch, but the signal is really bad. Then all of a sudden, they hear a weird noise coming from the sewers. And it turns out that it's our good friend Nuno. And Nuno is basically sharing what info he knows. He basically says, don't trust Almong. Almong is not as nice as he's coming across. He has some secrets that he's hiding. Basically, watch yourself. And Alexandra asks, like, is there anything that you can give me, any clues? And Nuno says, you'll find your answer on what this thing is by checking that vent that's right behind you. It likes to nest before it commits its next kill. And Alexandra looks inside the bloody vent and discovers a piece of cloth with Maria's initials on them. So she calls Hank, and she basically tells Hank, this thing is a Tiganok. I hope I pronounced that right. Basically, it's a feral goblin. It's a feral goblin that's inhabited a corpse, and the Cabal twins Or kind of like one of them asks, like, what does this thing want? And the other one responds, what does every child want? It wants to go home to its mother. And that basically is like, oh, so this creature, whatever it is Nova's baby. And then that got me thinking, did she like abort the baby? Did she abandon the baby? Like what the hell went on with this child? Yeah, we get a scene where Hank is inside the building and he discovers the baby. He finds it crawling on the wall. And the baby looks really messed up. It looks like something out of Dead Space. You know those spider creatures where you have to like shoot off the limbs? That's what it kind of looks like. That mixed with the baby creatures from the second episode, the second video game. Straight up, I'm just getting Dead Space vibes, which I'm kind of interested to see how the new game's gonna turn out. So eventually, Nova shows up, and she follows the baby's cries. Hank follows after her, and they find the baby inside this room. And Hank is about to shoot it, but Nova like walks up to it, and she kneels down, and she basically, we have this moment between mother and child where the mom is basically asking for forgiveness for abandoning her kid. And yeah, we get the whole story. So basically what happened was Nova got pregnant with the baby, but she realized that having a child out of wedlock would have completely destroyed her career. So she asked her longtime friend, Dr. Petra, to get rid of the baby, to put the baby out in the woods and just leave it. And so Petra does so, and she records her doing so as proof to Maria that I did what you asked. And that's what happened with the baby. They basically abandoned the baby in the woods, and it died, obviously, and now it's turned into this creature. And so, yeah, we have this moment where she's talking about when she was a child, like her grandma used to say something to her all the time, and she never really understood what her grandma was talking about. But now, seeing her child here, she finally understands. And we think that it's going to be like this sweet moment until she reveals what her grandma used to say to her all the time as a kid, which was, "You may have come for me, but you're worthless." I was like, oh crap. And then all of a sudden her psycho switch flips on, and she pulls out a knife and she stabs the crap out of her kid until she murders it again. And yeah, we just have this scene where she has this crazy eyes, blood splattering everywhere, all over her, all over the place, as she's stabbing the crap out of her corpse baby over and over and over again. I'm just like, holy cow. And the only reason she stops is because her knife breaks, and she still keeps trying to stab at it. And the only reason she stops is when Alexandra and the twins and Hank like pull her off and like, say, all right, it's over, like it's done. And so we have a scene where the cops are taking Miss Nova away, and I thought at first that they were arresting her, but they didn't. They were just basically taking her away from the scene. And we have a conversation between Alexandra and Among, where Among thanks Alexandra, like, thank you for what you did. My Maria is now safe. And Alexandra basically tells him, like, shut up. Like, you lied to me. Like, what you did, like, you allowed Maria to abandon her baby, and it died. You were messing with powers you didn't. You left it alone to the elementals. What you did is a disgrace. I don't ever want to see you again. Basically, yeah, she basically threatens him, like, if I see you again, like that, like I just go away and don't ever come back. And before he disappears, he basically gives Alexandra a warning. He says, there are some amongst your friends that are lying to you. There's a storm coming, which is basically something that she heard in the previous episodes. And you better get ready for it, and you better watch out, like, who you trust, and because there are liars amongst allies. And he disappeared. So Alexandra goes back to the dead baby, puts a blanket over it, puts some symbols around it, and then summons her fire demon to burn the baby and allow it to finally rest. So yeah, kind of sad, kind of a sympathetic demon in this episode. I mean, it was just a baby who wanted its mom, who abandoned him. Meanwhile, we cut back to Miss Nova, who's in her apartment, and she laying down, preparing to go to sleep. She decides to check her phone and realize that, Hollywood and stuff are talking about her. Like, the press is going to be calling. She thinks like, this is it. I'm finally going to make it big. And all of a sudden the lights start flickering on and off. And then when they come back, she sees more dead babies everywhere, more of these creatures. And then I was kind of wondering like, all right, what's going on? Are these other babies that she has abandoned? Because there's a lot of them. And I'm like, if there are, then this woman is not only getting really busy, but she's super fertile because there are a lot of babies for this woman for as young as she is. So is this like all her babies that she abandoned? Are these basically other babies that, from other people and they're getting revenge on her for killing one of their own? Was this all in her head? That's what I thought at first. Maybe it was all in her head and she was just, finally having a guilt moment over the fact that she did something terrible to her child, and after she did something terrible, she killed it with no remorse. So maybe now she's kind of suffering a little bit from the guilt. But no, it turns out this is actually real because all the babies surround her, and then we cut to outside her apartment where we hear her scream, and then we see her blood splatter the windows. So these babies kill her. But yeah, I have no idea what these babies are that decide to kill her. I don't know if they belong to her or if there are other babies just trying to get revenge. But yeah. So in the end, she gets her comeuppance. There you go. There's episode 3. All in all, I liked it better than the second one. I thought it was a lot better in the sense that it didn't feel like a mix mash of a bunch of like separate stories thrown together. We just had one story from beginning to end. Well, except for the Ramona flashback. But other than that, we just have one case that Alexandra's working on. And I was like, all right, good. That's kind of what I want. I want each episode to just be dedicated to one case. I don't like when she's doing multiple stuff, like in the second episode, because then we don't really get enough time to dedicate to each case. It just feels like everything's kind of getting rushed so that we can fit everything under the 30-minute timeline that we have for each episode. So this was a better told story, better flow, better structure. I will say that I'm not a fan of the Ramona flashbacks in every episode so far. Well, there wasn't no Ramona in the first episode, but in the second and third, I'm not a fan of that. I guess maybe this one, the Ramona, is somewhat the same tone, just in the sense that the dad, her lover, the father of her kids, she summons him and then he pulls out his sword and he threatens, and he's basically going to kill his family, which fits with this theme of the actress abandoning her kid and allowing the kid to die. But other than that, like, that's very, very loosely tied together. I would have just liked if you just have Ramona just be its own separate episode. Don't have it be sprinkled throughout, every episode. So I don't know if they're going to do it for episode 4, but I'm hoping they don't. Just focus on Alexandra and her case, and just have it just be one case. That way we can dedicate more time to like investigating and then coming up with clues and then, the big showdown and the wrap up and stuff like that. That's what I want to see from this series. So yeah, this was a better episode, better structured. I like the story. I like the story that it wasn't just this simple demons just hunting down people because whatever. I like the fact that it was kind of tied into our victim, who also ended up being the main suspect, and I don't know, it's also kind of a sympathetic villain. I don't even know if I really want to say a villain, because it's not really like it's this baby's fault. It was just the only people that it killed was Dr. Petra, who is the one that abandoned him into the woods, and then of course it didn't even try to kill its mom. It was just trying to, I don't know, reconnect with its mother. Feel kind of bad for it. But yeah, other than that, I like the fact that we got to see more personality out of Alexandra's bodyguards and out of Hank, because Hank was usually just more of like a background character. Hank had a bigger role in this, and I like the fact that like we get more of his personality and stuff. Speaking of personality, I would like to see more out of Alexandra, especially going forward. I will say that if you're a huge fan of Alexandra, this was kind of not the episode for you. She kind of had like an observer role in this. Yes, she was there. Yes, she played her part, but she felt more like a background character in this episode. Like, I feel like the other characters had more of a spotlight. So I don't know if you want to do that to your main character in the third episode, if you want to already kind of shove them into the background. But I don't know. I want to see more out of Alexandra. I want to see more just personality out of her. She's just way too stoic. And I get it if you say like, but Pirate, that's how she is in the comic. Then okay, like, I can't fault them for being faithful to the comic. If anything, like I would applaud them that they actually decide to be faithful to what they're adapting, because that's more than I can say from other Netflix stuff. But I'm hoping that we just see more personality from her, and when we do, that the voice actress plays it up a bit, because that's still been my kind of complaint. Again, maybe the voice actress is nailing this role perfectly because that's how Alexandra is, and she's completely stoic and doesn't, her tone never changes. Yeah, Alexandra is just basically, she's kind of cardboard at this point in time. There's the only personality we really see from her in this episode is when she gets upset at Amang for basically going along with Nova killing the baby, or abandoning the baby to the elements and letting it basically turn into this demon. So yeah, I like that. I like that Alexandra actually showed a little bit of personality in the fact that she was angry and she felt sympathetic towards this baby. Like she felt bad for it, and she was pissed at the people that did what they did to it, I like to see more of that. I want to see more personality from this character. But yeah, other than that, good episode. I'm liking this series so far. It's not like the greatest series at the moment. Hopefully it'll get a bit better, but it is good so far. It's entertaining. I like it. It has its rough moments and stuff, but overall it has a lot more positives than negatives. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I would say, what would I rank this episode? I would give it a 7 out of 10. Yeah, 7 out of 10. Yeah, that seems a bit, because for me, 5 out of 10 is an average. 6 out of 10 is good. 7 out of 10 is great. 8 out of 10 is awesome. 9 out of 10 is near perfect, and 10 out of 10 is perfect. I would say this is about 6.5, 7 out of 10. A lot better than the second episode. Still not as great as the first episode, but it was a good overall episode. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you next time. Later.